The global shipping industry moves 11 billion tons of cargo every year. That physical momentum makes it one of the most historically rigid sectors on the planet, highly resistant to sudden changes in course. Now, the International Maritime Organization has mandated that international shipping must reach net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. This timeline outlines the IMO's regulatory roadmap. Focusing on upcoming milestones, shipping is required to improve carbon intensity by 40% by 2030. But look at the jump required immediately after. The curve steepens dramatically, demanding a 70 to 80% reduction by 2040 before hitting absolute net zero a decade later. Right now, the industry is not on track to hit that first 2030 milestone. We lack the scalable, zero-emission technologies required for mass deployment. Simply installing scrubbers or optimizing traditional heavy fuel oil engines will not close a gap of this magnitude. The math does not work. Reaching the IMO mandate requires a transition from incremental hardware tweaks to a systemic overhaul of maritime operations. That redesign relies on what industry analysts call the double D trend, the simultaneous integration of decarbonization and digitalization. Decarbonization handles the physical reality. It is the swap from fossil fuels to alternative green energy sources. Digitalization is the deployment of artificial intelligence and the Internet of Things to optimize shipping routes and manage this new physical infrastructure. Yet, these two pillars rely entirely on a third, frequently ignored component, the human element. Moving to Shipping 4.0 requires a massive structural transformation of the maritime workforce. If you upgrade the fuel and the software but fail to train the people operating them, the entire architecture collapses. The primary candidates for zero-carbon maritime propulsion are green ammonia and hydrogen. Both suffer from a severe energy density problem. They contain less energy per volume than heavy fuel oil, meaning ships require significantly larger tanks, which eats directly into profitable cargo space. Keeping these alternative fuels stable during a 3-week ocean transit introduces a new infrastructural nightmare, requiring heavy cryogenic storage systems on board. They also introduce extreme toxicity and flammability risks into the highly confined, harsh environment of a commercial vessel. You cannot simply pump hydrogen into a legacy diesel engine. Existing propulsion systems are not optimized for these chemicals and require highly complex dual fuel modifications. At the port level, the global supply chain has a massive gap. Widespread bunkering facilities equipped to handle pressurized ammonia or liquid hydrogen simply do not exist yet. Traditional analog management systems are entirely incapable of safely monitoring and transferring these volatile new fuels. Managing these volatile systems requires a mandatory digital safeguard, the digital twin. IoT sensors continuously monitor temperature and pressure across the cryogenic systems. If a micro-leak develops, the digital twin detects the anomaly instantly, well before a human crew could spot it. That digital integration has to extend off the ship and into the terminal, requiring a fully AI-driven smart port. This diagram illustrates the self-optimizing operational loop. Artificial intelligence ingests data to break down silos between the vessel, terminal, and hinterland logistics. This optimizes berth scheduling, delivering a 25% reduction in vessel turnaround and a 50% increase in terminal productivity.
Efficiency is critical because decarbonization introduces a massive financial barrier. A zero-emission vessel carries a capital expenditure premium of 50 to 60% over traditional ships. To make the math work, the massive upfront capex costs of these new vessels must be offset by the compounding operational expenditure savings derived from digital solutions, like lower fuel consumption and reduced port fees. Digitalization pays for decarbonization. It creates the closed-loop economic model required for green shipping to survive on a commercial scale. But what happens when you ask a workforce trained on 20th-century diesel mechanics to run a 21st-century smart port? This 2026 operational forecast exposes a demographic crisis, a shortage of 90,000 qualified officers. We are handing seafarers control of floating data centers without specialized IT training. The consequence is vulnerability. Note the metric. 83.8% of cyber threats now target operational technology, threatening physical systems. Current projections show that up to 800,000 seafarers must be completely retrained by the mid-2030s, just to handle the safe transfer of alternative fuels. This skills matrix illustrates the new cognitive load required. Operators must merge traditional complex maritime operations with entirely new competencies in digital management, automation, and sustainability protocols. Billions of dollars invested in autonomous port technology and green fuels yield zero return if the human operators cannot safely execute the mission. The logistics of upgrading the entire global maritime network, retraining millions of workers, and building a new fuel supply chain all at once are impossible. The only viable deployment mechanism is the establishment of green digital shipping corridors. These corridors are localized, dedicated maritime routes between two or more specific ports. They act as isolated operational testbeds. This map details the Liverpool-Belfast model, a real-world example of a corridor piloting e-methanol fuel trials and commercial shore power frameworks. These corridors consolidate R&D, allow governments to align regulations, and provide a guaranteed demand hub. To function, a corridor requires tight integration across a complex value chain. Data must transfer continuously from the fleet hub to port authorities and financial verifiers, while green energy flows back to the vessels. These corridors act as highly controlled incubators. They absorb the immense financial and operational risks of integrating new fuels, software, and human training before the industry attempts to scale them globally. Achieving maritime decarbonization requires a total systems integration. The fuel transition depends entirely on the digital and human architecture surrounding it. Alternative fuels provide the zero-carbon energy. Digital platforms optimize the economics and ensure safety. A highly upskilled workforce oversees the execution. All three must operate in absolute synergy. By proving this architecture within isolated green digital shipping corridors, the industry can slowly link these routes together, eventually forming a resilient global zero-emission network. Stakeholders who attempt to invest in isolated technological fixes, rather than adopting this holistic model, will face severe compliance risks during the IMO's 2030 regulatory reviews. Rigidly deploying these three pillars within specific corridors creates the scalable model required to reach the 2050 net zero mandate.